Hi everybody, this is Taffy bringing you my Fire Emblem 4 LTC. This run will cover both incomplete recruitment and ranked. FE4 is famous for its giant maps, and each chapter will require seizing multiple castles. Prologue is the smallest map and requires us to first seize Jngvi and then Evans. We will start off with 4 units, Sigurd, Alec, Nisha, and Arden. Sigurd is our lord and the star of Generation 1. He comes with just one skill follow-up, but it is perhaps the most important skill in the game, allowing him to double enemies with lower attack speed, which in this game can even be negative. Sigurd is also our first 9-move unit, and he sets the pace of the first half of the game. He has excellent base stats, and with his starting steel sword, he can one round all the level 1 enemies on the map. He also has 2 leadership stars, which let him give himself and any allies within 3 tiles 10 extra hit and avoid. Alec and Nisha are the 2 cavaliers. Alec is basically a weaker Sigurd, coming with follow-up and Nihil, which prevents critical hits and most proc skills activating against him. Right now he only has a weak iron sword, which is nerfing his damage output. His pal Nisha does come with more strength and a steel sword, but his skills are critical, allowing him to crit with any weapon, and Onslaught, which has been translated as a cost before, which is a proc skill that can add extra rounds of combat to a fight if Nisha has more than 25 HP, with a greater chance of activating the more HP Nisha has and the more he outspeeds his opponent. Proc skills are less reliable than simply doubling, and Onslaught in particular has a certain flaw that I will explain in the next chapter, but in a rigged run they can help Nisha muscle through enemies he otherwise wouldn't. The last starting unit is Arden, the Sword Armor. Arden is clearly intended to be something of a joke unit with just 5 movement. He comes with Vantage, which lets him go first in combat always if he has less than half his HP, and also negates enemies' Onslaught skills. That interaction never comes into play in this run, and Vantage honestly makes him worse at a certain job we will see in Chapter 1. Given that this LTC will cover ranked, we do want to train basically everyone, so Arden will have one shining moment in Chapter 3. Jngvi actually starts off green, and in this scripted cutscene, it was captured by the enemy. Something to note is that FE4's RNG always starts with the same seed in every playthrough, but unlike GBA, we cannot wiggle arrows to advance the RNG. We will see an alternative method next chapter, but for now, we're forced to play Prologue with this fixed RNG string. In fact, the clear you're watching is basically the same as Palla Emblem's clear. Palla Emblem, also known as Valkama, was a big help with the planning of this playthrough, and their run served as valuable reference. Turn 2 sees the arrival of 2 new units, Lex and Hazel. Lex is an Axe Knight coming with the same Vantage skill as Arden, and Paragon, which doubles his EXP gain. Lex generally cannot one-round enemies with his lack of both follow-up and proc skills, and as such generally will focus on chipping enemies for other units during his active time. Paragon is one of the best skills in a ranked run, and given that enemies on the map are ultimately a finite EXP resource, it allows him to minimize the number of enemies he needs to kill. Azel is a mage who comes with a heavy fire tome. He does have follow-up, which means he can double and one-round the even slower level 1 enemies, but he has very weak bases. Still, he promotes to Mage Knight, which gives him a horse, and as such is one of the more impactful promotions of the game. We'll have to give him special attention to ensure his training stays on track. Here, Lex will help feed him some kills to get the ball rolling. You might have noticed the Brigands attacking the villages. Unlike in other Fire Emblem games, Brigands do not instantly destroy villages, taking 10 turns to burn them down in their entirety. Each turn destroys 500 gold from the eventual reward for visiting the village. Some villages also give items or stat boosts. Alec and Nisha's stats are tuned to let them tag team the low-level enemies on this map. Sigurd can essentially solo his way to Jngvi Castle, so we have Alec and Nisha run through the center to handle some side objectives. We want Sigurd to grow 2 strength before he reaches the castle guards. On turn 3, we were joined by 3 more units, Quan, Etlin, and Finn, who are 3 of the best units in the generation. Quan is a promoted 9-move unit similar to Sigurd, which will let him keep up with him until we can get our other units to promotion. He comes with the proc skill Adept, which gives an attack speed plus 20% chance of letting him attack an extra time. Quan also comes with an important secondary weapon in the Javelin. This game tracks the number of kills of weapon grabs, and once it reaches 50, the weapon unlocks the ability to crit, and gains extra crit rate for each extra kill up to 50%. This makes building kills on key weapons important in the run, and 1 to 2 range weapons benefit the most from this, since their might tends to be a bit lower, while 1 to 2 range is obviously a very desirable property. Quan's Javelin is the first generally usable 1 to 2 range weapon we get, and in the prologue, Quan will prefer to kill with it in order to get started on building kills. Sigurd's Steel Sword similarly will be grinded up, taking advantage of all the kills that it gets in the prologue, though it is less important and is more of a convenience. Quan's wife Etlin is our first staff user, though she can also use swords. This makes her one of the most important units when she's around. She has critical, and importantly, she gives us access to some special mechanics. When her brother Sigurd or her husband Quan are within 3 spaces of her, they gain 10 extra hit and avoid, and if they attack on player face from next to her, they unlock the ability to crit and get a free plus 20 crit to boot. This will be used for some boss skills. Finally, we have Finn, the Lance Knight. Finn has follow-up and miracle, a skill that lets him gain a boost to avoid when he falls below 11 HP. With careful setups, this will allow Finn to pull off big enemy faces that essentially no other unit reasonably can, especially with the Javelin. Finn is also the only unit who appears in both generations of this game. Sigurd needed 2 strength levels to one-round Jngvi Castle's guards with the Steel Sword. If he counts squares, he can theoretically reach Jngvi Castle a turn earlier, but we can't actually clear his way and chip down the boss to let him seize. Taking an extra turn allows Sigurd to kill the guards himself, and Quan comes in with a javelin to set up the boss kill for Sigurd. Seizing Jngvi recruits the final new unit of the prologue, Midir. Midir is an archer knight who has follow-up and onslaught. His bases are alright, and while bows don't make for a great enemy face weapon, being on a horse will make him a relevant unit for much of Generation 1. Enemies seem to have a weird preference for targeting him at 2 range. Longtime viewers of my work may have noticed all the imperfect level ups and be wondering what's up with those. I did not modify the growth rates of characters in the game at all, and this is for a few reasons. There are multiple instances of anti-benchmarks in this playthrough that aren't particularly harsh but would be a problem with 100% growths. Additionally, spoilers for a game from 1996, the growth rates of several characters in the second generation are determined based on their parents' growths for the first generation. And finally, the actual stat benchmarks aren't too unreasonable to rig for, so instead of constantly juggling growth edits, I decided to just play the game as is with the translation patch. I also made a conscious effort to route the run so it should work on an unpatched version of the game without the bug fixes the patch introduces. This does mean that we don't strictly maximize EXP in the prologue since we're beholden to the whims of the RNG string, but Valk did a very good job of routing out the clear you're seeing. Normally when you seize a castle, all enemies affiliated with that castle disappear from the map. Prologue is special in that almost all the enemies are actually affiliated with the second and final castle of Evans. Something to note is that we want Sigurd to grow a lot of speed for a strategy in the next chapter. Finn doesn't do much in this chapter and instead focuses on reaching the village near Jngvi Castle, which will give us the speed ring. Stat boosting rings are equipment that grant plus 5 to a stat, piercing stat caps. The speed ring is obviously most valuable on a unit with follow up, and Finn is the one unit who gets the most out of it for now, letting him double most enemies on the next map. Nisha baited over a brigand, and that was for a side objective that only he could accomplish. Unlike Alec and Lex, Nisha can avoid 2-rounding a level 1 brigand, and that let us place him there within range of the green unit Arvis. Arvis then moved much further than he normally would to nuke him, which places him in range of Sigurd for the next turn. On the subject of gold, in FE4 every unit has their own personal wallet, and this makes gold management important, especially in a ranked run. Arvis talked to Sigurd to give us the silver sword. This is an upgrade to the steel sword and might, and as you'll see for this playthrough we could probably have grinded kills on either one of those weapons, but the steel sword has 3 advantages. In this game, weapon ranks are static, determined by a unit's class and holy blood. Alec will always have B swords, and a certain unit who joins later will have B swords until promotion, and choosing the steel sword allows them to put kills on it while they're being trained. The steel sword also has a significant head start. We put 15 kills on it before we even get the silver sword, almost a third of the way to unlocking crit. And finally, the steel sword is less expensive to move around. There, we see an example of onslaught proccing. Midir is probably one of the better users of this skill since it's much easier to meet the conditions when you're attacking at 2 range and avoiding a counter. On turn 9, we clean up everywhere. To deal with the boss, we either need Quan to chip him or Etlin to help Sigurd crit him. We will opt for the latter, and that'll be Prologue in 9 turns.